A giant rancher found her near death and discovered the warmth he never knew he needed. The rancher was a man who seemed larger than life, not just because of his tall, broad frame, but because of the way he moved through the world. People often stared when they saw him walking into town, his boots heavy on the dusty ground, his hands thick and calloused from years of labor. Some said he was like a mountain, solid, unmovable, and alone. The truth was that he had chosen his life carefully, yet not entirely by choice. Life had a way of shaping him into this quiet giant, and he had learned to live with the weight of it. His ranch lay far from the nearest town, stretching across rolling hills and wide-open plains. In spring, the grass grew thick and green, and the air smelled sweet with new life. In winter, the wind cut across the fields like a sharp knife, leaving the world cold and quiet. The rancher moved with the rhythm of the land, rising with the sun to feed the animals, mend fences, and check on the cattle. Each day was much the same, but he liked it that way. It kept him focused, kept his mind from wandering to thoughts he preferred to avoid. Though he was surrounded by acres of land, he had never felt the kind of companionship that most people needed. Friends had come and gone, some unable to keep up with the hard work, others intimidated by his size and quiet demeanor. People whispered about him in town, calling him intimidating, rough, or mysterious, but none truly knew him. They did not see the loneliness that sat heavy in his chest at night, when the sun had gone down and the house was silent except for the soft creaks of settling wood. His home was simple, much like the life he led. A sturdy wooden house stood near the center of the property, with a fireplace that glowed warmly in the evenings. The furniture was plain, functional, and slightly worn, but it held a sense of comfort. Shelves lined the walls, filled with tools, old photographs, and a few books that he never had the patience to finish. Outside, the barns and stables were neat and well kept, a testament to the care he put into his work. Yet despite all of this, the house often felt emptier than the fields beyond it. The rancher had not always been alone. Long ago, he had known warmth and laughter, but life had been unkind in ways he still carried. A family lost too soon, friendships that ended with betrayal, and a love that had slipped away, all left scars that never fully healed. Over time, he had built walls around his heart, believing that solitude was safer than risking pain again. People came and went, but he remained, a silent figure in the wide-open land, content to let the world pass him by while he tended to his animals and the land he called home. Yet, despite his self-imposed isolation, the rancher was not unkind. He helped neighbors when he could, fixed broken fences for those who needed it, and never refused assistance when asked. It was just that he rarely spoke more than necessary, and his presence could feel imposing because of his size and the intensity of his gaze. Some people mistook his quiet for coldness, but in reality it was protection from the world and from the parts of himself he kept hidden. Every morning he would rise before dawn. The rooster crowed, the sky slowly brightened, and he went about his routine with precise steps. He fed the horses first, brushing their coats until they shone in the early light and speaking to them in soft, calm tones. They knew him, trusted him, and never questioned his actions. The cattle came next, moving in herds across the fields, their low sounds blending with the wind. He would check the fences, repair broken posts, and make sure nothing had strayed. Each day the work was the same, yet it carried a kind of quiet satisfaction. There was pride in knowing the land was his to care for, even if it did not offer companionship in the traditional sense. Evenings were the hardest. After the work was done, he would sit alone by the fireplace, the warmth contrasting with the cold he carried inside. He sometimes tried to read, but the words often blurred, and he would put the book down, staring into the flames instead. Memories came to him then, faces, laughter, mistakes, and moments of happiness that seemed so distant now. He never let them linger too long, not because he did not want to feel, but because he feared the ache that came afterward. The silence of his home was heavy, yet familiar. Despite all of this, there were small joys in his life. He enjoyed the early mornings when the sun touched the hills, and the birds sang like they had no care in the world. He liked the smell of fresh hay and the sound of the creek that ran along the edge of the property. Sometimes he would catch a fox or a deer far off in the distance and pause, marveling at the quiet beauty of it all. These moments were fleeting but precious, reminding him that life, even in solitude, had moments worth noticing. The rancher also had a soft spot he rarely admitted to the animals. Each creature, whether a horse, a cow, or even a stray dog that wandered onto his land, received his care and attention. He talked to them gently, fed them patiently, and often stayed up late tending to their needs when something was wrong. They responded to him with trust and loyalty, offering a kind of companionship that did not judge or hurt. For him, they were family, though he sometimes wished that human connections could be as simple and reliable as those of the animals he loved. Though people rarely visited, he sometimes thought about what it would be like to have someone share the quiet nights with him. A friend to talk to, a partner to help with the endless work, or simply someone to sit with by the fire. But the walls he built around his heart were strong, and he told himself that he did not need anyone. Life had taught him to rely on himself, and he had grown used to the routine of solitude. Still, deep down, there was a longing he did not fully understand, a soft part of him that craved warmth and connection. On one particularly cold morning, the wind blew harder than usual. The sky was gray, heavy with clouds, and the rancher moved through his chores with a sense of quiet determination. He fed the animals, checked the fences, and mended a section that had been weakened by the winter frost. The land was harsh at times, but he respected it. It demanded hard work, and it gave him structure. Without the land, he thought, he might lose himself entirely to the emptiness he sometimes felt. He paused for a moment on the hill overlooking his property. The cattle moved slowly across the plains, the wind carrying the scent of grass and earth. He felt a strange mixture of pride and isolation. His life was his own, yet it was lonely. He had everything he needed to survive, but he wondered, though he rarely admitted it, whether survival was enough. Could he ever allow someone in? Could he ever let his heart soften, even a little? These questions lingered but remained unanswered, buried beneath the daily tasks and the routines he clung to. As the day ended and the sun dipped below the horizon, the rancher returned to his home. He built a fire in the fireplace and sat quietly, listening to the crackling of the wood. The wind outside howled across the plains, but inside the warmth felt comforting. He sipped a cup of coffee, staring at the dancing flames, and allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. Despite the solitude, despite the hard work, despite the memories that sometimes haunted him, he still carried hope in some small, hidden corner of his heart. It was a hope he did not fully understand, a quiet awareness that life could change, that the world might still hold surprises. He did not know when or how, but he felt it nonetheless. It was this small ember of hope that would eventually guide him toward a moment that would alter the course of his life. A moment when he would find that connection, warmth, and meaning he had long denied himself. For now, though, he remained a giant in the vast plains, strong and solitary, moving through the world with careful steps, unaware that his life was about to take a turn that would test everything he had believed about loneliness, strength, and the quiet power of human connection. He was a man of the land, a man of routine, and yet, like everyone, he carried a heart capable of change. And the first step toward that change was already waiting somewhere just beyond the horizon, hidden in the ordinary rhythms of a life that had grown too familiar. The morning air was crisp and sharp as the rancher stepped outside. The sky was painted in soft shades of pink and orange, and the wind rustled through the tall grasses like a whisper across the land. It was the kind of morning that made the rancher pause just for a moment to appreciate the quiet beauty of his world. He moved through his usual routine, checking fences, feeding the animals, and making sure everything on the property was in order. Life was predictable as it always had been, until he noticed something unusual near the far edge of his land. At first, it was easy to mistake it for a shadow, something caught in the tall grass. But as he approached, he saw the unmistakable shape of a person lying face down. His heart skipped a beat, not from fear but from sudden concern. He ran the last few steps and knelt beside her. The woman was pale, her clothing torn and dirt-streaked, and she barely moved. Her breathing was shallow, and her eyes fluttered weakly open for just a moment before closing again. He had no idea who she was, why she was there, or what had happened to her, but instinct told him she was in trouble. Without thinking, the rancher lifted her gently, careful not to cause further injury. She was lighter than he expected, fragile in a way that made his own strength feel almost overwhelming. Carrying her across the uneven ground, he moved as quickly as he could, guided by the simple thought that she needed safety. His home was not far, and the warmth of the fire and the shelter of the walls would be the first comfort she had felt in a long time. Even as he carried her, he noticed how still she was, her body limp, her lips pale. She seemed to be holding on to life by a fragile thread, and the rancher's heart tightened at the thought of losing her before he could even help. Once inside, he laid her carefully on a blanket he had spread across the floor near the fireplace. The fire crackled softly, casting a gentle glow over the room. He fetched a warm cloth, dipped it in hot water and pressed it to her forehead, hoping the heat would bring some comfort. He spoke to her in low, calm tones, words more of reassurance than expectation, because he knew she might not respond. He did not know how long she had been alone, or what dangers she might have faced, but he felt a growing determination to keep her alive. In all his years of working the land, he had faced storms, injuries, and countless hardships, but nothing had prepared him for the fragility of a human life so close to slipping away. For hours he watched over her, adjusting her blanket, checking her breathing, and offering small sips of water whenever she showed signs of waking. She was unconscious most of the time, drifting in and out of awareness, and each time her eyelids fluttered open, the rancher felt a surge of hope that she would pull through. Though he was not a man of many words, he found himself talking to her about the land, the animals, and even the quiet mornings that he loved. His voice, deep and steady, seemed to provide a strange comfort, as if the sound of life itself could reach her even when her own body was too weak to respond. As the day wore on, the rancher realized that this moment was unlike any he had experienced before. Caring for the animals, repairing fences, and tending to the land had always been a solitary task, one that he could manage alone without much thought. But this fragile human life in his hands, demanded attention, patience, and a kind of emotional energy he had not used in years. He was not afraid exactly, but he felt the weight of responsibility in a new way. Every breath she took seemed like a small victory, every flutter of her eyelids a reminder that life was precious and delicate, and that he was now entrusted with it. Finally, as evening approached, she stirred more noticeably. Her eyes opened fully, and she looked at him with confusion, fear, and exhaustion all mixed together. She could not speak, and he did not push her. Instead, he offered her a warm drink and sat by her side, simply watching over her. She was shivering, so he wrapped a thick blanket around her shoulders, feeling the frailty of her body against his hands. Her trust was quiet but growing, as if she recognized, even in her weakened state, that he was there to protect her. The rancher had never known what it meant to care for someone so completely, to feel the weight of their life pressing gently into his own. His days had always been measured by the rising and setting sun, the steady work of the land, and the quiet routines of survival. Now they were measured in breaths and heartbeats, in moments of consciousness and stillness. It was exhausting, but in a way that made him feel alive in a manner he had forgotten existed. He was used to solitude, but this new responsibility brought with it a strange, unfamiliar warmth. She eventually began to speak, her voice weak and uncertain. She told him fragments of her story, how she had been traveling alone, how she had fallen, how no one had been there to help her. She spoke in pauses, her words halting and slow, but the rancher listened without interruption. He did not ask questions immediately. He simply allowed her to speak when she could. Every detail she shared seemed to deepen the connection forming between them, a fragile bond built on trust and care. For the first time in years, the rancher realized that he was not merely performing a task, he was making a difference in someone's life. As the night settled over the ranch, the fire casting dancing shadows across the walls, the woman finally rested more comfortably. The rancher stayed close, keeping watch as he had all day. Sleep came slowly, and when he finally allowed himself to rest, he did so with one eye open, listening to the gentle sound of her breathing. He thought about how unexpectedly this person had entered his life, how fragile she had been, and how much he already cared for her well-being. In that moment, he understood that life had a way of surprising even those who thought they were prepared for everything. Over the next several days, the rancher continued to care for her. He prepared simple meals, made sure she stayed warm, and checked her for signs of infection or pain. Each day brought small improvements, and each improvement brought relief and quiet joy. She began to regain some strength, able to sit up and eventually move around the room with assistance. Their conversations were still brief, filled with pauses and careful words, but a rhythm was forming. They shared small moments, watching the sunset, listening to the animals outside, laughing quietly at minor accidents or clumsy attempts to perform simple tasks. These moments, though ordinary, began to feel extraordinary to both of them. The rancher began to notice changes within himself as well. He had always prided himself on his independence, his ability to survive alone, and his strength in the face of hardship. But caring for her reminded him of something he had long forgotten. That human connection, even in the simplest forms, could bring a kind of fulfillment that work and routine never could. He felt a sense of purpose beyond his own survival, and it was both startling and comforting. He realized that his life had room for more than just solitude and labor. It could also hold warmth, companionship, and trust. As the woman's strength returned, she began to notice the care, patience, and quiet strength of the rancher. She had been alone for so long that the attention, though gentle and unassuming, felt almost unfamiliar. There was no pressure, no judgment, just consistent presence. It was a stark contrast to the harshness of the world she had endured, and it made her feel safe in a way she had not felt in years. Slowly, trust began to blossom between them, fragile but undeniable, like new grass pushing through the cracks of dry earth. By the end of the week, the woman could move freely around the ranch under his supervision. She explored the barns, helped with feeding, and even joined him on short walks across the property. Each shared task strengthened their bond, not through words alone, but through the simple act of being present for each other. The rancher, who had once believed solitude was the only way to live, discovered that caring for someone could bring a sense of purpose and fulfillment far beyond what he had imagined. It was a quiet revelation, a gentle awakening to the warmth and richness of human connection. Though neither of them knew what the future held, the days that followed set the stage for something neither had expected. The rancher's home, once a place of strict routine and solitude, was now filled with quiet laughter, soft conversation, and shared work. The woman, once fragile and alone, now had strength, safety, and companionship. Their lives had intersected in a way that changed them both, a collision of need and kindness that neither could have predicted. In saving her life, he had discovered something he never knew he needed, a connection that began to thaw the cold edges of his heart. By the time the second week passed, the rancher and the woman had established a rhythm, a pattern of shared life that felt natural and comforting. They worked together, laughed together, and simply existed in each other's company. It was a beginning, small and careful, but full of promise. In the quiet moments, they would glance at each other, sharing unspoken understanding and gratitude. Neither spoke of the future too soon, knowing that trust was built slowly, day by day. But both felt it growing, a seed of warmth planted in the middle of hardship, ready to take root. And so, the rancher who had once known only routine and isolation began to understand that life could be more than work and survival. It could be shared, tender, and alive with unexpected connections. The woman, once abandoned and near death, discovered that safety, care, and kindness still existed in the world. Together, they began a journey neither could have imagined, a journey that started with an unexpected encounter on the edge of life and would continue to transform them in ways they had yet to understand. The days that followed the woman's recovery became a new kind of rhythm for the rancher, a rhythm that neither he nor she had expected. Their lives, once separate and lonely, began to intertwine in small, quiet ways. The rancher, who had spent years alone with the land and animals, started noticing things he had never thought about before. Her laughter when she discovered a playful calf, the way her eyes lit up when sunlight hit the fields just right, and how her presence made even ordinary chores feel less burdensome. He realized that caring for her was no longer just a responsibility. It had become something he looked forward to, a part of his life he could not imagine being without. She, in turn, began to feel more comfortable in this strange, quiet world he had built. At first, everything had felt unfamiliar: the wide-open spaces, the silence, the routine of life on the ranch. But the rancher's patient guidance, his steady presence, and his quiet words created a sense of safety she had not known in years. She started to explore the land, helping with feeding the animals, checking the fences, and learning the small tasks that kept the ranch running. Every step she took, every small accomplishment, was met with gentle encouragement from him. She learned not just the work of the ranch, but also the unspoken rules of trust, care, and respect that he lived by. Their conversations grew slowly, filled with pauses and careful thought. He was not a man of many words, and she had been silent for too long, but together they discovered a quiet comfort in speaking simply and honestly. She told him small fragments of her life, where she had come from, the struggles she had faced, and the times she had felt most alone. He listened without judgment, responding with gestures, simple questions, or stories of the land. In these exchanges, they both began to understand each other, not only through words but through the trust that formed between them. It was a delicate process, one that required patience, understanding, and an openness neither had shown before. One afternoon, as they worked together to repair a broken fence near the edge of the property, the rancher noticed how carefully she handled each task. She was determined, focused, and even cautious at times, yet her confidence grew with every step. He offered guidance when needed, but he also let her try on her own, knowing that independence was important. Watching her, he felt a sense of pride he had not felt for many years. It was different from pride in his work or accomplishments. This was a quiet, emotional pride, the kind that comes from seeing someone grow stronger because of your support. The woman, in turn, began to notice the subtle details of his life. She saw the careful way he fed the animals, the gentle tone he used when speaking to them, and the pride he took in maintaining the land. She began to understand that his strength was not only in his size or physical ability, but also in his patience, dedication, and quiet consistency. The rancher, who had once seemed so distant and untouchable, began to reveal himself in small, human ways, smiles that appeared when he thought no one was watching, stories of his past shared in fragments, and moments of unexpected humor. She realized that beneath the exterior of the quiet giant was a man capable of deep care, empathy, and even warmth. As the days grew longer, they began sharing small routines that brought them closer. Mornings were filled with chores, afternoons with walks or tending to the animals, and evenings with quiet reflection by the fireplace. She learned to cook simple meals, and he began to enjoy the smell of food in the house, a small comfort he had not experienced in years. They shared laughter over minor accidents, spilled milk, tangled ropes, or clumsy attempts at tasks. But these moments were never mocking. They were gentle, a way of connecting through shared effort and simple joy. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, casting a golden glow over the fields, they sat together outside, watching the cattle graze. The air was warm, and the only sounds were the soft rustling of grass and distant calls of birds. Neither spoke at first, but the silence was comfortable, filled with a sense of companionship neither had expected. Then she spoke softly, asking about his life before the ranch, about the people he had lost and the choices he had made. For the first time, he shared more than the surface details, revealing the memories that had shaped him, the loneliness he had carried, and the ways he had learned to survive on his own. She listened attentively, and in that moment, a deeper understanding formed between them. She realized that the rancher's solitude had not been chosen lightly. It had been a shield against pain and disappointment. But she also saw the strength behind his quiet exterior, the resilience that had allowed him to endure hardships and care for others despite his own struggles. He, in turn, began to see her not just as someone he was helping, but as a person with courage, resilience, and an inner light that had survived even the darkest moments. Their bond was growing, quiet but undeniable, a connection forged through shared experiences, trust, and care. As the weeks passed, their lives became more intertwined. She learned to ride the horses, help with medical care for the animals, and even navigate the harsh weather of the plains. Each new skill she mastered brought her confidence, and each shared experience brought them closer. They faced small challenges together, unexpected storms, sick animals, and the hard work of maintaining the ranch. But these challenges became opportunities to trust each other, to rely on one another, and to recognize the value of partnership. The rancher, who had once believed that life was best lived alone, began to feel a shift within himself. Caring for her had awakened a part of him he had thought long gone, the part that longed for connection, warmth, and companionship. He found himself thinking about her when she was not around, wondering how she was, and hoping she was comfortable and safe. These thoughts were unfamiliar but not unwelcome. They brought a sense of purpose and meaning he had not experienced in years. He realized that life on the ranch, no matter how vast or beautiful, had felt incomplete without someone to share it with. For the woman, the rancher became more than a caretaker. He was a steady presence, a source of safety, and someone she could trust completely. She felt comfortable enough to ask questions, offer suggestions, and even tease him gently when he made small mistakes. This playful exchange, though simple, was significant. It was a sign that she felt at home, that she trusted him not only with her safety but with her heart. In return, he began to allow small glimpses of vulnerability, admitting fears, sharing memories, and even expressing moments of joy he had not allowed himself to feel in years. One afternoon, as they worked together in the barn, a sudden summer storm broke over the plains. Rain poured down in heavy sheets, thunder rolled across the hills, and the wind howled. They scrambled to secure the animals and protect the property, working side by side. In the chaos, there was laughter, quick gestures of help, and unspoken reassurance. By the time the storm passed, they were soaked, exhausted but smiling. It was a small but powerful moment, proof that together they could face challenges, and that the bond they had formed was stronger than either had imagined. Evenings became a time of reflection and quiet joy. They would sit by the fire, sharing stories, observing the night sky, and sometimes simply sitting in silence, comforted by each other's presence. The rancher, who had once thought of silence as a shield, began to see it as a shared space for connection. The woman, who had experienced so much fear and uncertainty, found peace in this quiet companionship. They did not need grand gestures or dramatic words. The simple act of being together, of caring and sharing, was enough to build trust and deepen their bond. As the weeks turned into months, the rancher noticed the subtle changes in himself. He smiled more often, laughed more freely, and felt a lightness he had not known in years. He began to understand that strength was not only in solitude or physical ability, but in the courage to open one's heart, to care for someone else, and to accept care in return. The woman had become a mirror for his own humanity, reminding him that even the strongest, quietest people need connection, warmth, and companionship. She, too, was transformed. The fear and uncertainty that had once dominated her life were replaced with confidence, trust, and a sense of belonging. She had learned not only to survive but to thrive in a place that had once seemed intimidating. The rancher's guidance, patience, and steady presence had given her the space to grow, heal, and rediscover her own strength. Together, they had created a life that was both practical and filled with quiet joy, a life that neither had expected but both had come to cherish. By the time the season changed, their bond was undeniable. They had shared work, meals, laughter, storms, and quiet moments by the fire. They had faced challenges and discovered each other's strengths, weaknesses, and resilience. In saving her, the rancher had rediscovered the warmth and connection he had long denied himself. And in being cared for, the woman had found safety, trust, and hope. Their relationship was not perfect, but it was real, rooted in shared experiences, mutual respect, and the kind of trust that could only develop over time. The rancher no longer viewed life as merely a series of chores and survival tasks. He understood that life could be shared, meaningful, and even joyful. The woman no longer felt the crushing weight of fear and abandonment. She had a place where she was safe, valued, and respected. Together, they had begun a journey not just of recovery, but of discovery. Discovery of each other, of the depth of human connection, and of the possibilities that life could hold when two people cared enough to open their hearts. And so, the quiet giant of the plains and the woman he had saved continued to live side by side, learning from each other, growing together, and finding in each other a warmth neither had ever known. Their story was still unfolding, but one truth had become clear. Sometimes, the strongest bonds are forged not in grand gestures, but in quiet acts of care, patience, and presence. Life on the ranch had grown quiet, steady, and filled with small joys. The rancher and the woman had settled into a rhythm of work and companionship, and their days were marked by the shared routines they had come to cherish. Yet, despite the peace they had created together, reality had a way of reminding them that life outside the ranch could be harsh and unpredictable. The outside world, with its rules, expectations, and judgments, began to intrude gently at first, then more insistently, challenging the fragile peace they had built. One morning, as the sun rose over the hills, casting a golden glow across the fields, the rancher noticed a vehicle approaching along the dusty path that led to his home. It was unusual for anyone to come this far, and his instincts immediately sharpened. The vehicle slowed near the edge of his property, and a man stepped out, clipboard in hand. He introduced himself as an investigator from a nearby social services office, explaining that he had been looking for the woman and needed to confirm her identity and well-being. The rancher, cautious and protective, listened quietly, his eyes flicking to her. She looked anxious, unsure of how to respond, and for the first time she felt the pressure of the outside world pressing in on the sanctuary they had built together. The conversation was polite but tense. The investigator asked questions about how long she had been on the ranch, how she had come to be there, and what her living conditions were like. The rancher answered simply and honestly, emphasizing that she was safe, well-fed, and cared for. Yet, beneath the words, there was a quiet tension, a fear that the intrusion of the outside world might disrupt the fragile bond they had developed. The woman, who had spent so long feeling abandoned, experienced a wave of anxiety she had thought long buried. She realized that trust and safety, though present on the ranch, were still vulnerable to forces beyond their control. After the visitor left, silence settled over the house. The rancher and the woman exchanged a few words, but the weight of unspoken fears hung between them. She wondered if she would have to leave, if the world outside would pull her away from the safety and warmth she had found. The rancher, who had never allowed anyone into his life so completely, felt a protective surge. He wanted to shield her from anything that could hurt her, but he also recognized that life sometimes demanded difficult choices and confrontations with reality. Their quiet home, once a refuge, now felt fragile under the pressure of the unknown. Over the next few days, the woman wrestled with her past. Memories she had tried to leave behind resurfaced, times when she had been alone, abandoned, or left to face hardship without support. She realized that healing was not a straight path. It was messy, filled with moments of fear, doubt, and uncertainty. The rancher noticed her growing hesitation and gave her space, understanding intuitively that she needed time to reconcile her past with the present. He did not rush her or demand explanations. He simply stayed close, offering silent support, warmth, and presence. His quiet patience became a lifeline as she navigated the emotional turbulence that life outside the ranch continued to stir. One afternoon, a letter arrived, sent from someone in her past, a distant relative reaching out after years of no contact. The letter expressed concern, asking where she had been and hoping she was safe. Reading it, the woman felt a mixture of emotions: surprise, anxiety, and a flicker of hope. She wanted to respond, but the thought of stepping back into the uncertainties of the outside world terrified her. The rancher, noticing her hesitation, offered no advice, only his presence. He understood that this decision was hers alone, and that pushing her too soon could undo the trust they had carefully built. At the same time, the rancher faced his own internal challenges. He had grown accustomed to the quiet life, to the predictable routines, and to the sense of control he had over the ranch and his own heart. Yet the arrival of external pressures, the investigator, the letter, the reminder of a world beyond his fields, forced him to confront feelings he had long suppressed. Fear, uncertainty, and vulnerability crept into his thoughts. Could he protect her? Could he allow her to make her own choices without losing her? These questions lingered, unspoken but pressing, shaping his actions and thoughts in subtle ways. The woman decided to spend time walking through the fields, letting the open air and the movement of the land help her think. She had been given safety, care, and stability, but she knew that the world outside the ranch was waiting. The tall grasses swayed in the wind, the sun warmed her face, and the soft sounds of the animals around her provided a sense of grounding. As she walked, she reflected on how far she had come, not just physically but emotionally. She had survived alone, been rescued, and learned to trust someone again. The rancher's consistent care had shown her that kindness and protection could exist without conditions or expectations, a revelation she had never imagined possible. Back at the house, the rancher watched her from the porch, his hands folded loosely on the railing. He knew that change was inevitable, that life could not remain untouched forever, but he also knew that he would do everything in his power to support her choices. He realized that love and care were not about control. They were about presence, patience, and understanding. In the quiet of the afternoon, he felt a deep shift within himself, a recognition that his heart had grown in ways he had long denied. The warmth he felt was no longer only about physical comfort. It was about connection, trust, and the profound impact of caring for another human being. Challenges continued to arrive. One day, she mentioned needing to meet someone from the city regarding her past, and he felt an unfamiliar tightening in his chest. The thought of her facing the wider world, with its uncertainties and dangers, made him anxious. But he also recognized that she needed to take these steps for herself. He prepared her carefully, offering practical advice about travel, safety, and communication, and reminded her that she was capable of handling what came next. In doing so, he realized that protecting her did not mean sheltering her from the world entirely. It meant equipping her to face it with confidence and strength. Their bond deepened further during moments of quiet reflection. They would sit by the fire in the evenings, sharing their thoughts and fears. She spoke of her insecurities and worries, and he shared fragments of his past solitude, the losses he had endured, and the reasons he had built walls around himself. These conversations, though sometimes difficult, strengthened their trust. They discovered that vulnerability was not a weakness but a bridge to understanding. In sharing their inner worlds, they reinforced the connection that had grown from the simple act of saving a life into something far more meaningful, a partnership of mutual respect, empathy, and emotional support. The rancher also faced the subtle judgment of neighbors and townspeople who had heard of the woman's presence on the ranch. Some whispered doubts about her past, while others speculated about the relationship between them. He ignored the gossip, knowing it was meaningless compared to the reality of their connection. What mattered was the trust and bond they had built together, and the knowledge that both had changed because of it. In doing so, he began to understand that true strength was not in physical size or solitary endurance, but in the courage to care for someone openly and without fear of judgment. The woman's confidence continued to grow. She began participating more fully in ranch activities, offering suggestions, learning tasks independently, and even taking the lead on certain chores. The rancher observed her quietly, noticing her determination and resilience. He realized that she was not just recovering, she was thriving. The ranch, once a place of solitude for him, had become a space for shared growth, mutual learning, and emotional healing. They both understood that this transformation had not happened overnight, but was the result of patience, trust, and consistent care. One evening, during a particularly calm sunset, they walked together across the plains. The sky was painted in hues of orange and pink, reflecting off the distant hills. She spoke softly of her hopes for the future, uncertain but cautiously optimistic. The rancher listened, feeling a quiet warmth spread through him. He recognized that the journey they were on was not just about survival or routine. It was about discovering life in its fullness, about embracing vulnerability and trust, and about understanding that love and care could exist even in the most unexpected circumstances. By the end of Part 4, both the rancher and the woman faced the reality that life beyond the ranch would always be a possibility, bringing challenges, responsibilities, and moments of uncertainty. Yet, they had learned to navigate these pressures together. The rancher had discovered that protecting someone did not mean isolating them from the world, and the woman had learned that trust and care could exist even after years of hardship. Their connection had grown resilient, rooted not only in circumstance but in shared experiences, emotional understanding, and the quiet strength of mutual respect. Through these trials, they discovered something essential. Warmth, trust, and human connection were not fragile. They could endure even in the face of uncertainty, fear, and the outside world. The rancher and the woman had learned to face challenges together, supporting one another while honoring their individuality. They realized that life was not about control or predictability, but about embracing change, facing fears, and nurturing bonds that offered both safety and growth. And so, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the plains, they returned to the house, side by side. Their hearts carried the lessons of the past, the warmth of their bond, and the courage to face whatever the world beyond the ranch might bring. They had discovered, through care, patience, and shared life, that love and trust could flourish even in unexpected places, and that together, they were stronger than the challenges that lay ahead. The ranch had grown quiet again, but the quiet was different now. It was no longer the solitary silence of routine, but the shared calm of two lives intertwined. The rancher and the woman had faced the tests of survival, recovery, and the encroachment of the outside world. Now they faced a new phase, not danger, not hardship, but the gentle challenge of building a life together with intention, understanding, and trust. Both knew that life would never be simple, yet each had learned the value of connection, patience, and mutual care. The rancher began to notice the warmth that had settled into his days. It was in the small things, the way she laughed when a calf nuzzled her hand, the quiet encouragement she offered when he struggled with a task, and the comfort of shared meals by the fire. He realized that this warmth was not dependent on grand gestures, but on the simple, consistent presence of someone who cared. His heart, which had long been guarded behind walls built from past losses, had softened in ways he had not thought possible. He discovered that the greatest strength he possessed was not physical, but emotional, the courage to care and to let himself be cared for. The woman had grown strong, confident, and independent. The experience of near-death, recovery, and trust had transformed her. She moved through the ranch with purpose, her hands skilled, her steps sure. Yet she was no longer alone, and the companionship she had found in the rancher gave her a sense of safety and belonging she had never known. She realized that home was not just a place but a feeling, a space created by trust, warmth, and shared life. Each day, she felt more rooted, more connected, and more willing to embrace the love that had quietly entered her life. Together, they began to shape routines that reflected their partnership. They rose with the sun, feeding the animals and tending the land, but they also allowed themselves moments of quiet enjoyment, sitting together on the porch, watching the sunset, sharing stories, or simply being present in the same space. Work became easier because it was shared, and the tasks that once felt solitary and repetitive were now opportunities for collaboration, laughter, and quiet companionship. Even in moments of fatigue, they found joy in supporting each other, reinforcing the bond that had grown from an act of care into a lasting connection. Challenges continued to arise, as they always do in life. Storms battered the plains, animals grew sick, and the realities of the outside world occasionally reminded them that safety was never absolute. Yet, unlike before, they faced these challenges together. The rancher, who had once believed he must endure everything alone, discovered that sharing responsibility did not diminish his strength, it enhanced it. The woman, who had once feared uncertainty and vulnerability, learned that courage could grow in the presence of support and trust. Together, they became stronger, their bond resilient in the face of trials that might have overwhelmed them individually. There were also quiet, tender moments that neither had anticipated. One evening, as the fire crackled and the stars filled the sky, they shared stories of their pasts, losses, mistakes, and the experiences that had shaped them. They spoke honestly, without fear of judgment, and discovered that vulnerability could be shared safely. The rancher revealed memories of isolation and grief, of the weight of solitude and the fear of connection. The woman shared fears, past betrayals, and moments of loneliness that had haunted her. In these exchanges, they found understanding, empathy, and the realization that each had been saved in their own way. He through her presence, she through his care. As the seasons changed, the ranch transformed along with them. The land flourished under their combined care, and their home became a place of laughter, warmth, and stability. The rancher found joy in sharing his knowledge and skills, guiding her through the work of the land while also learning from her perspective, ideas, and strength. The woman found a sense of purpose and belonging, contributing fully to the life they were building. Each day reinforced their partnership, teaching them that life was richest not in solitude or survival, but in connection, love, and shared effort. Their relationship deepened in subtle ways. A glance, a gentle touch, or a shared smile became meaningful gestures, small affirmations of trust and affection. The rancher, once reserved and wary of closeness, began to recognize the value of these moments. He understood that the warmth he had felt in her presence was more profound than anything he had known. It was a reminder that human connection could heal, strengthen, and sustain him. She, in turn, embraced the safety and care he offered, learning to let go of fear and accept the love that had quietly grown between them. Eventually, they reached a point where the question of the future could no longer be ignored. The woman considered the possibility of leaving the ranch, returning to a world she had avoided for so long. The rancher faced the realization that he did not want her to leave, yet he respected her freedom. Their discussions were careful and honest, filled with emotion, reflection, and shared understanding. Through these conversations, they learned that true connection does not demand possession or control. It thrives on trust, respect, and the willingness to grow together, even amid uncertainty. The final test of their bond came with a difficult decision, whether she would stay permanently on the ranch or return to face her past. It was not an easy choice, and both felt the weight of it deeply. She feared leaving the comfort and safety she had found, yet she also knew that confronting her past was necessary for her full healing. The rancher, who had always feared loss, realized that supporting her meant allowing her to make her own choice, trusting that their bond was strong enough to endure. In the end, the decision was mutual, grounded in love, respect, and the recognition that their connection was not fragile but resilient, capable of weathering life's uncertainties. When she chose to stay, it was not just a decision but a declaration of trust, commitment, and hope. The rancher, who had long believed that life was best endured alone, finally allowed himself to embrace the warmth he had never known he needed. Together, they continued to build their life, working the land, caring for the animals, and sharing moments of quiet joy. The ranch, once a symbol of solitude, had become a sanctuary, a home, and a place where love and trust could flourish naturally. In the quiet of their evenings, they often reflected on the journey that had brought them together. From the day he had found her near death, to the days of recovery, growth, and mutual understanding, their lives had been transformed. The rancher discovered that strength was not measured in isolation or endurance alone, but in the courage to care, trust, and allow warmth into one's heart. The woman realized that healing and safety could exist even after years of fear and abandonment, and that love could grow quietly, steadily, and powerfully in the right place. By the time winter arrived, the ranch was alive with the warmth of companionship. Fires burned in the hearth, animals thrived under their care, and the vast plains seemed less lonely, filled with the presence of two hearts that had found each other. They faced the cold, storms, and challenges together, strengthened by the bond they had formed. The warmth they had discovered in each other's presence became a guiding light, a force that shaped their daily lives, their choices, and their dreams. In the final moments of Part 5, the rancher and the woman sat together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. They did not speak, for words were not needed. The shared silence carried more meaning than any conversation could. They had discovered something rare and profound, that life's greatest gift is connection, and that the warmth of human care can heal even the most guarded heart. The rancher, once a solitary giant of the plains, had finally found not just companionship, but a warmth he had never known he needed, and in finding it, he had discovered the fullness of life itself.